Hey guys, how's your week going? I just have an incredible episode for you today with Jenny Stinney. Well, at least that's what her Instagram is. I was fangirling her for a while. Her name's Jen Stinnett, and she's really, really good at working out at home. And so I really have enjoyed a lot of her videos on Instagram. And I was about to reach out to her and then she got pregnant with twins. So in today's episode, we kind of go through, she got pregnant in college with her first and like navigating that world. And then like her next pregnancy was a loss. So trigger warning for this episode. Then her next pregnancy with her child Gabe and how different those labors were. And then she gets pregnant again. Boom, twins. So there's a lot of birth stories in today's episode. So let's just get to it. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Heids. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them, and you, deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. So let's say you're pregnant. That's why you're listening to the Birth Story podcast and you're preparing for a hospital birth that's upcoming. And of course, this podcast gives you tons of free information, right? But do you really understand the stages of labor? How to know when you're in labor? What if you have to have an induction? What about a cesarean section? What about all of the decisions that you have to make once you get to the hospital? So you get there and then they put you in triage. Birth Story Academy walks you through all the things that happen, like that rapid fire with monitoring and blood work and questions and IV ports. And do you want an epidural? I don't know. Do you? In Birth Story Academy, we literally break down all of those decisions. Pros, cons, risks, benefits, intuition. And we get into it. We make birth plans, we do birth visions, we listen to birth affirmations and parenting affirmations. And at the end of it, you know exactly what's going to happen when you go into labor and when you get to the hospital. What's going to happen after you give birth, newborn care preferences, how to take care of your baby. I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're not in Birth Story Academy, what's your plan? I want you to come join me in Birth Story Academy and let me walk you through all of the decisions that you have to make if you're having a hospital birth and how to have body autonomy and how to have informed consent and informed refusal. I'm going to teach you and your partner, if you have one, everything that you need to know about birthing in a hospital so that you can walk in that door with some swagger, with some confidence, wash that anxiety away, because you learned everything you needed to learn in Birth Story Academy and you are ready to crush that birth. Okay, let's do it. And let's get to this episode. Hey, Jenny, welcome to the Birth Story podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so great. And I love following you on Instagram. And I'm really excited that we're able to finally connect. And I have wanted to connect with you before you even had twins. And so here we are.
I know, it's crazy. I feel like it's gone by so fast. And actually, you're the one person that I reached out to first, because when I got pregnant with the twins, it was kind of like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And then I was like, I have to reach out to her for any resources or just other twin moms that, you've worked with and whatever. So you were the first person, one of the first people that I reached out to
Yeah, and
when
I
it
don't even
happened.
know how I started following you. Because I've been following you for a long time, but I think it was mostly like watching you do the workouts like in your backyard, and I was like, okay, I can do this. and
I
f-
think it was after Gabe because Gabe's birth was unmedicated and fast and natural, and I think like I might have like hashtag something that you like followed me after I had Gabe all the way back in 2019.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was like, you never know how you connect with like different people on Instagram, but I'm
Yes.
glad that I've been following you. And I really think this is a great time to be recording. So, you guys, we're going to dig into Jenny's birth stories. She's got three live births and one loss. And so, single, loss and then twins. So, just trigger warning, we are going to talk about loss today. And so, if this episode isn't going to serve you, then go ahead and skip it or fast forward through that part. But we're going to talk about like how different birth can be. And then like twins. I just can't even with this. So Jenny, let's start at the beginning. Like, take us back to like your very first pregnancy. How old were you?
So I was 22 and still in college when I
Okay.
got pregnant with Bruce. Yep.
Tell me about what life was like for you. Like, what were you doing in
Um,
college? What were you studying?
I was a psychology major at James Madison, and I actually transferred in there from community college. I had moved around a lot, um, and then I was in Jacksonville, Florida. That's where my mom lives, and I moved up to Virginia to be with my dad, and then ended up transferring into James Madison from community college in Virginia. So I was a psych major and ended up getting pregnant there my second semester and went back pregnant just to, get through a couple more classes. Went on hold for a semester, had Bruce, and then pretty much changed my entire life. Like I was kind of on a path of not making the greatest decisions, obviously, being in college and getting pregnant, like without a plan, but it was such a great pivotal moment for me and changed the trajectory of my life in a great way. It didn't feel like it at the time, but it really did. I ended up graduating a couple years after that. My husband and I have been married since right around the time Bruce was born, and just kind of making it work in
Hmm.
the Northern Virginia area, expanded our family in 2019. So our first was turning 4, and then we had our second, and then fast forward, and we had twins a couple years later. Completely different, just different births and life experiences out of all four, or well, all four kids, 3 pregnancies.
Well, one of my favorite books is called Transformed by Birth. And I had the author Britta Bushnell on a couple of months ago. And it's one of the most powerful podcast episodes that I've recorded, also. But it really speaks to the fact that birth and pregnancy transform us every time in new and in different ways. And so I love the way that you articulated that. Like, here you are, this 22-year-old, like college student, just kind of like
Mhm.
flittering around and trying to figure life out. And pregnancy transforms us and it can motivate us in really good ways to have a becoming, And
Mhm.
some people embrace that, some don't. It sounds like you really embraced it and have done a lot of cool things with your life. So let's dig into Bruce's birth story. So
Oh
you're
gosh.
young, and I mean, like, young to me. I mean, my mom had my brother at 19. So like, our family is used to young, but I didn't have a baby
Yeah.
until 37. So 22, I'm thinking back on life at 22 and I'm thinking that feels young. and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was a fun time. So like having some of
Yeah.
that taken away maybe. So tell me about how you found out you were pregnant.
We actually found out we had both done Maymester. So that was after the spring semester ends, you stay for 4 weeks and it's like a condensed class.
Okay.
So we both stayed for that. And before we left, he just was like, I think you should take a pregnancy test. And I was on birth control. So it's like, I think I'm fine. And it was the day before we left to go back home. He was doing an internship and I was, going to be waiting tables, just saving up money for the next semester. And it, it was positive and it was kind of in a complete oh shit moment for me. And it was not a great time, obviously. I wasn't doing the greatest in school. It just wasn't, I just didn't have direction at the time. And so I actually, full disclosure, did go to Planned Parenthood, and that was my first stop when I got home. Was I was going to, confirm it, but it was something that I didn't feel like I could talk to my family about at the time, and it was kind of a shameful thing for me. And so, I did go to Planned Parenthood, and for me, looking at the ultrasound was just that moment where I knew in my heart that I was going to be a mom, and didn't go through with anything at Planned Parenthood and went to waiting tables for the summer. And he ended up coming down because his family was in Northern Virginia. My family was in Virginia Beach. His internship was in Richmond, which was the halfway point between the two. And he came down and surprised me one night, and we just were like, we're going to figure it out. We're going to make it work. And from there, we ended up getting engaged. Both went back to James Madison for the fall, which was really heavy for me. Being at a kind of James Madison's, it's a great school, but it's also a party school. And being pregnant during that semester, it was in my head a lot. I thought that people were pointing fingers at me, probably more than they really were, but everything felt so heavy at that time. It wasn't poorly received from our families, but it wasn't like a celebratory thing from
Yeah. And you
our
were living
families.
on campus?
Yeah, well, no, I wasn't on campus,
Okay.
but
So you were commuting.
JMU, it's like the underclassmen stay on campus, but everything's apartments off campus.
Okay.
So I mean, it's very much kind of like that. It's kind of like off campus dorm
Okay.
apartments.
Were you allowed to live together because you were engaged?
Nope.
Okay.
So I had my own apartment, he had his. We definitely stayed together a lot.
Yeah.
Very
I
frequently,
mean, you
but
need some foot rubs at
yeah, right,
night. It's so
right,
hard. Hey,
right.
let me just say right now, I'm proud of you for choosing life. That's not an easy thing to
No,
do.
it's not.
And I am proud of you for staying together. And I'm proud of you for going back to college.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I
That
mean,
was
this is
it was
really
a
inspiring.
I appreciate you saying that because it was not easy. And especially like I didn't have something in my life where school was the route to get there. So it was one of those things where I wasn't fired up about school. Um, I feel like our generation specifically, it was you go to school and then you'll get a job, and then it's kind of been like, well, enjoy your student debt and good luck, you know.
Right.
So I didn't have that like the thing that I was on fire about. But I knew I needed to go back, and all our families were really pushing for me to go back to school. But yeah, so we did that. He ended up graduating that December, and then we moved to Northern Virginia where his family lives. From
Okay.
there, yeah.
Is that specifically so you could have family support?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And a little help, and the job market in the Northern Virginia, DC area for what my husband, was going to be doing it's a great spot to be. So,
Okay. So what'd you know about
mm.
pregnancy, birth? Like you had 9 months, right? How,
Yeah.
like, did you read books? Did you listen to podcasts? Did you watch stories on TV? Like where was your headspace as a college student?
Well, so my pregnancy wasn't as well received as I would have liked, and it was just kind of a stressful time. So I kind of internalized a lot and kind of just went with what was being told to me by, the physicians that I was seeing at the time. So that changed from I was on my dad's insurance, so it was naval care, TRICARE.
Okay.
So I was seeing a naval doctor, and then it went from being up in Harrisonburg at JMU and seeing, the doctors up there. And so every place was a little bit different, but I didn't know much. Bruce's or my husband's sister, she was pregnant at the same time as me, and she recommended a book called Bringing Up BB.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that one,
I haven't
but
read that one.
it's real. It was just about sleep and from a French perspective. I don't really remember much specifically about the book except for introducing foods and sleeping with the baby. But I didn't listen to podcasts at the time. I was just kind of like, my birth plan was, I'll play it by ear. So that's just how it went. And Bruce's father is actually a medical doctor as well. So it was good to have his guidance as well. So when I went into labor, he was kind of there to, time the contractions and, okay, this is when you need to go to the hospital. And
Oh,
so it was just
good.
very,
This is
I don't
what
know,
we
just
call
different.
denial, Jenny.
Right. Yes, that sounds about right.
Whenever my clients we'll have different check-ins and stuff because we really don't start like digging into childbirth education and birth preferences and stuff until after about 30 weeks. And they're like, I just was gonna like go with the flow. I hired a doula. And I'm like, so when you're ready to get out of denial that you're having a baby, we'll dig into some
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Yeah. So I love that Bruce's dad was like timing your contractions. So tell me about that. Like so you were at your in-laws' house?
Yes, yes. And
Okay.
it's hilarious because, and I have a great relationship with them, and everything, but it was still new. And it was like, we weren't married, and they're a very conservative Christian family. And so, like, it was still, we're not as close as we are now. So I went into labor, and I was laboring at midnight, and I was laboring by myself because I just needed to be by myself. So I remember drawing a bath in their, in the bathroom. And then in the morning, Bruce, went into the kitchen where they were, and he was like, I think Jen's in labor. So he timed the contractions, and Bruce's mom immediately made me a smoothie. And I remember cussing and just apologizing for cussing because they were so, Christian, and they didn't cuss or anything like that. And I have kind of a mouth of a sailor. So I just, and of course, I'm like trying to work through contractions. I had no idea what it was going to be like. And I just remember begging for anything that would stop the pain. And so he timed my contractions, and we ended up going to the hospital, and they measured me. My water hadn't broken yet. And I remember I was only 3 centimeters. So they were like, you can labor for a little bit, but we might send you back home. And I looked at them like they were crazy. You're not sending me home. This is too painful.
Yeah.
And then just walking through the hallway, I remember drinking ice water, or I ended up like feeling I was going to throw up, and my water broke on the table, and it was showing signs that he had meconium.
Yeah.
And so at that time I was like between 4 and 5 centimeters, and they're like, you ready for the epidural? Do you want an epidural? And I was like, yeah, give me the epidural. Just begging for it.
Yes, make it go away.
Yes, because I didn't know what it was going to be like. I was just kind of winging it, like you said, denial.
Yeah. Hey, Jenny, I got something to share with you though. I'm a doula. I knew exactly what it was going to be like. And I still asked for the epidural when I was 2 centimeters dilated. And they were telling me they were going to send me home because I wasn't in labor. And I was like, I am in labor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I told them, I'm like, I'm in labor, da, da, da.
It's very
But I
hard.
ended
The
up,
first births are very hard and very
hmm
long and very exhausting,
oh yeah,
And once
oh
your
yeah,
water breaks, it's like a whole new game
oh
too.
yeah.
So,
I remember. So they gave me the epidural, and honestly, the epidural freaks me out to this day. The whole process and just realizing that it's going into my spine just freaks me out. And I remember the nurse was such a gem. She held me, and I just remember my husband's face when he saw the epidural, like his eyes got so big.
like the needle, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, but he was very supportive, and we just kind of labored, and they put the epidural in maybe at like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, and Brucey was delivered at 5:44 in the afternoon.
Yeah. So you had less than
Son.
a 24-hour labor, but it sounds like
Hmm.
you did a lot of the labor through the night on your
Yeah.
own. Yeah.
Hmm.
Did you
Yeah.
sleep much that night or were you just in and
No.
out of the bathtub and just kind
I
of,
was in and out. I don't think I got out of the bathtub. I think that I just like transitioned from sitting up to my laying on my side to letting the water shower over me,
yeah.
and just honestly just breathing and kind of thinking to myself, oh my gosh, it's coming. Like,
Yeah.
definitely it. This has to be it.
And so it was slowly building. It wasn't
Oh
like,
yeah. No, it wasn't how it's portrayed, in
yeah.
movies and stuff, which was pretty much the only context I had. I had at the time, and this will kind of come full circle later, but my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, she's my nana. I would call her because she had four, and she is the one who had the maternal pass down for twins.
Okay.
So, and I just remember because, being in college, like I said, that was really hard on me. And so I would, call her periodically and just talk to her, and just talk to her about childbirth. And of course, she had all her kids, well, three of her kids in the 60s. So childbirth for her is just a completely different ball game. She didn't
Mhm.
even know the difference between what it's like now versus what she went through. But
She probably didn't even have an ultrasound with those twins.
she didn't know that she had twins.
Yep, I was gonna
And they
say,
came
surprise.
super early. They came at like 33 weeks. They were not
Oh,
very big, 2 or 3 pounds a piece, very small.
wow.
And they're fine. I'm super close with my aunt. But she had my mom and my aunt and uncle within the same year. So she had twins and an Irish triplets, I guess. I just cannot imagine.
I cannot. And I mean, you have twins, so you can probably imagine more than all of us
Yes.
listening right now, but
Right.
cannot imagine. So,
No.
so did you call your Nana in labor?
With Brucey, no, I
No.
didn't.
Okay.
No.
I wasn't
No,
sure.
because I think just because Bruce's parents were there, and because his dad, is a doctor, and was just kind of like, I don't even think I called my own family. I think I just was like with
Mhm.
my husband and trying to. I remember getting the epidural and telling him that I would have 10 more babies, and then not even realizing we would have four.
Hey, and you're only 31 years old, right?
I know. I know. I think I'm done now. I think I'm done.
The word think is strong in that
Um,
sentence. It is, Jenny. So, after the epidural went in, did you get to, I mean, it wasn't until 5:45 PM. So did you get to like take a nap or kind of like rest and let go? Did it work? Did the epidural work?
oh yeah, it
Okay.
definitely worked.
Okay.
Yeah. I rested. I think we watched a movie, and I kind of went in and out of sleep, dozed a little bit, and then I was 10 centimeters at 5 o'clock, and I remember the nurses, and then NICU had to come in because of the meconium.
Okay.
And so that was kind of scary because the heart rate was dropping periodically throughout the labor. And I didn't really understand at the time what that meant. I honestly believe that how naive I was in the first pregnancy saved me a lot of anxiety,
Mhm.
because these things are things that I definitely stressed about in my specifically the twin pregnancy.
Okay.
Um, I think I think my go with the flow denial, like I like that you worded it like that because that's definitely what it was. And I never even thought of it that way. But
Mhm.
um, I think that attitude probably just saved me a tremendous amount of stress.
Yeah.
So,
I can see that.
um,
Sometimes ignorance is bliss,
mhm,
right? Versus hyper focusing on these heart decelerations, which are completely normal. Like as the baby's head gets lower and gets squeezed, especially after your water's broken, the squeezes get stronger. Sometimes there's a squeeze on the umbilical cord or the umbilical cord's wrapped around the neck or pinched. And so these are really normal decelerations and they typically come right back up when the
mhm,
contraction's over. But if you're focusing on them, they're going to totally freak you out, right?
mhm,
So you
mhm.
pushed 45 minutes, it sounds like, right?
I did.
Which is not too long. And
Mm-mm.
for those of you listening, NICU comes in anytime there's meconium. That doesn't mean the baby's gonna go to the NICU. It just means that there's a neonatal intensive care like team that can resuscitate should the baby need that extra support. So did Brucey end up needing that support?
No, he did not actually. So,
Okay.
they came in. So it was funny. I gave birth, and Dad went immediately over to where Brucey was.
Okay.
And there's no baby. I didn't get initial skin to skin contact. They took him, but
Okay.
it was just this little cart that they rolled into the room, and they just kind of cleaned him up, made sure that he could breathe.
Okay.
I think that's really what they want. So he came out crying, which was the nurse immediately said to me, "He's crying. Great sign. Good job, mom." So I was immediately reassured.
Awesome.
Um, and he went with him, and then within like maybe 20 minutes or so, he was on me, and we were
Okay.
latching.
Okay.
So it really wasn't that big of a deal. I know friends personally that have, the babies had to go all the way to NICU. We just had to do the cart in the room, and everything was good to go after that.
Okay.
So,
So for someone who really didn't prepare that much, I mean, and I do this for a living, it doesn't sound like it was a terrible birth by any
no,
means. It
no,
just
it wasn't. No, it
sounds
wasn't.
like and I love that you labored alone for like 10 or 11 hours, right through the middle of the night. I mean, that sounds wonderful. But I've heard you say the word naive a couple of times for this birth. So, what's different about baby number two, Gabe's birth? Like, what changed for you when you got pregnant again?
Gabe actually came after the loss. So I miscarried
Oh, okay.
in between Bruce and Gabe. And so
Okay.
Gabe, I was very anxious, like just because I wanted to make sure that every appointment I knew heart rate. I be like, honestly, it was a complete polar opposite of
Okay.
what I was in Bruce's pregnancy. And also my exercise and diet was completely different
Okay.
during Gabe's pregnancy. It was like, I mean, and I had figured out health and fitness after I had had Bruce. So I think it wasn't necessarily because I was pregnant. It was just because that's how I had changed in between the two kids.
Okay. So, this makes
Yeah.
sense more. I initially thought that you had had two live births and then a loss. So, to go from that experience and then to have had a miscarriage.
Hmm.
And then, like, everything is different after a miscarriage.
Hmm.
Everything. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that loss?
Mm-mm. No,
Sure.
not at all. So we decided we were gonna start trying for a second child at the end of 2017, like towards the end, so November. So we got pregnant immediately, and something didn't feel right to me in my gut before I went to the first appointment, and I ended up going, and the doctor or the ultrasound tech came in and like, "Oh, I'm not detecting a heart rate. It could be nothing. We'll like send you home, and then if you start bleeding, come back in, or we're going to schedule an appointment maybe everything will be fine by this date. And then a couple of days later, I did start bleeding. And so I called the doctor, and I ended up getting an advice nurse. And I was like, hey, I'm bleeding. I was told to call if I start bleeding. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm miscarrying. And she responded back, if you were miscarrying, you would know. And she kind of had an attitude with me. And I was like,
Gosh.
geez, that didn't sound like a very empathetic response from an advice nurse at an OBGYN office. And so
Yeah.
I continued to bleed. Like, it started very minor, and then it progressed. And like I said, my husband's father's a doctor, and my husband called his dad because, and my husband is not a worry wart. He's not like, he's kind of a rub some dirt on it type of guy. Like, you're fine, brush it off. But his dad came over. He's like, I think you need to come over. So he came over. He's like, oh, you're gray. You need to go to the emergency room. And I was losing a ton of blood at this point. And I ended up going to the ER. And it was honestly one of the worst experiences I've ever had. Obviously, losing a baby is a horrible experience in itself, but going to the emergency room after you've been told by the advice nurse that if you were miscarrying, you would know. And I go in, nobody will tell me like confirm what's going on. And then the ultrasound tech in the ER was the one that she can't tell me, but she is the one that told me that, like, there's nothing anymore. You must have cleared it, like, either while you were here or, at home before you came in.
But you were
And
continuing to bleed?
yeah, I was continuing to bleed. And so they just like kept a watch on me, and then they hooked me up to an IV.
Okay.
Um, yeah. And
Any pain
we,
medicine given or offered?
they kept saying they were going to give me pain meds, and then they never did. They just never, it was just an awful experience altogether.
All around.
Um, and I just remember leaving the hospital and kind of being numb for a little while after that. It's one of those experiences where you wonder what happened, and you always wonder what happened. It kind of leaves a pit, and then you have to surrender if you continue to try after that, to the experience and trust and all those things. And we did that, but I still felt like kind of detached my whole pregnancy with Gabe, but obsessed about my doctors and like making sure that my body was going to be able to like give birth. So
All of
yeah,
that
it
makes
was,
sense. I mean, you
yeah,
studied psychology, right? Like
yeah,
all of that makes sense that you had a really traumatic miscarriage. Like you were not seen, you were not heard, you were not nurtured, you were not taken care of. And from the time you made a phone call all the way through the emergency room, I mean, the system failed you. Like
hmm,
they failed to give you medical care, first of all. I mean, and I wouldn't call an IV medical care. Like
no,
they failed to
no,
give you medical care, but they really failed to give you any sort of emotional care at all, you
hmm,
know?
hmm.
Um, I want to go back to your husband's dad. So at this point, they knew you were pregnant or did not know that you were pregnant? Or
Yeah,
like,
so we have actually told them very early on,
okay,
in every experience.
okay.
Yeah, just because it's their support, their prayer, like,
Yeah.
I just feel like it's always a good thing to tell them.
Okay, good. I was wondering if you were like, hey, and by the way, I'm having a miscarriage because I'm pregnant. Like, like passing to your
Mm-hmm.
father-in-law, like in that moment or not. So he already knew and he knew to go.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that he sent you to the emergency room trusting and praying and hoping that
Mm-hmm.
these people in this community were going to take care of his daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah, he did.
didn't. So what advice do you have for lost moms that are miscarrying? Like maybe they found their way to the podcast. Like, is there something advice that you would give as far as like advocacy and self-care to help get through a miscarriage at home versus like a DNC or a DNE, right? Like you had a natural
Yeah.
miscarriage.
Yeah. Kind of hard because every situation is so unique and different, but I mean, just telling yourself it's okay and it's not your fault, and doing whatever it takes to be in that vibration, I guess. So for me, it looks like taking time to do the subtle things that bring me back to earth. So it's grounding, walking around barefoot outside. It's continue on continuing on with an exercise program. It's putting love and compassion into what's in your life now, and just trying to release yourself of any guilt that you might feel, and also surrender and trust that it can happen for you, and to get your body and your mind into the best place for that to happen for you. I truly believe that it's a hard thing to get through and get I don't think you ever get over it, though. I think that's the piece, is you never really get over that pain. It always stings a little bit, moving forward. But yeah, I think just always center yourself and have a routine that gets you centered.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about your routine, because something that changed for you from being like young college girl, right? Like,
Yes.
I'll just go with the flow. Then you go through let's say three major life events, right? Like, you get married, you have a planned pregnancy this time, you lose this baby you had already given birth, successfully before, right? Like, so at some point you start evolving and growing and changing. And so what did life look like then when you got pregnant with Gabe? Like, what were you guys doing? What were those
So,
routines and rituals?
I had become a personal trainer, and I was actually home from the gym environment. I was in the gym environment for about a year, and then we came home because the schedule is hard for growing families. But at that time, I was kind of just being a mom, and I would utilize the gym daycare because it's amazing. I know a lot of other people's quality of gym care might not be as high, but we've been extremely blessed with our gym. So that became a huge saving grace, because it also provided, my child with a place to socialize, and they actually offer classes and stuff at the gym for him. So just became a part of our routine, and that structure really helps me still to this day. An outlet for my body, for my mind. It's literally like therapy for me. So yeah, so Brucey and I would do that, and I just would go maybe 4 times a week, and then when we weren't there, we're just kind of exploring the area. Northern Virginia has been the one place I've lived the longest, but I had never lived here before. So, over the last several years, it's just been kind of exploring and figuring out new places to go. And it's a great historical area. Well, we figured that out, lots of trails. So, got into hiking. And then I ended up writing a children's book when I was pregnant with Gabe, because I had this idea. Brucey actually said the title Monsters Can't Do Yoga. I'm like, that sounds like a good children's book title. And I kind of just had it in the back of my head. And I was maybe 7 months pregnant with Gabe. And I said to my husband, I was like, I think I'm going to write a children's book. Okay, go ahead. And I had dabbled a little bit in photography in that time. I was just kind of soul searching, really. I sat down and in 1 week wrote the book. And like I said earlier, I feel like with each pregnancy, I've evolved, and new creations have come with the life I'm creating within me, and I've definitely dialed in on that. And it's been more of a conscious feeling, with the twins and everything. But yeah, so at that time, it was really just getting more structure into our lives, figuring out the flow of having a family, and schedules, and meal planning, and figuring out what I'm going to do moving forward, because being a mom and having a career is really, really challenging task, especially in 2023. So I think that was the time period where I was just figuring that all out, but
Yeah.
also still I don't think I do not think that I handled my miscarriage the best I could have. I feel like I could have dealt with it in a different way that wouldn't have been so suppressed for so long and kind of leaked into my pregnancy. I don't think I enjoyed my pregnancy with Gabe as much as I could have had I healed a little bit differently at the time.
What do you mean by that? Like going to therapy
Yeah,
or
I think going
okay.
to therapy, like just to kind of grief process a little bit better than I did.
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
about 5 different perinatal specialists and postpartum specialists here in my area in Charlotte, North Carolina that specialize in kind of loss and pregnancy after loss. And so I really encourage anyone listening to like take Jenny's advice on this and really, if you have a miscarriage, just even girlfriends that you can talk about it and just, there's something about just saying it out loud over and over again and processing it that each time can give you clarity or lightness when we get it out of our body. So,
I agree with that. And to your point on friendships, one of my best friends here, she went through a miscarriage around the same time I did and then got pregnant around the same time I did. She was due a month after me. I ended up going a week overdue and she went at 36 weeks. So our sons are literally a week apart and their temperaments are so similar. They're both wild maniacs. So I mean, still to this day, we get together, we hike and stuff together, but she helped me. I remember I was going through it. I was just kind of in my feelings about the miscarriage, and she was too. And she came out, and at that time, my son was finishing up daycare. And I was like, I need to go pick him up, but I want to walk. I was like, it's right up the road. It was like a 2-mile walk there. And then we're like, go the long way home. It ended up being a 9-mile walk. And we did it together. And it was such a like silly thing, but
I
just a
hope you had a
laughing.
stroller.
We did. We had a
Okay.
stroller. I don't really remember. It was also really cold that day, but it's one of those things that we did and it didn't make any sense, but I feel it was something that was kind of healing for both of us.
Just
But yeah.
connecting with, I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes I feel like our wombs are talking to each other, Sometimes I'm in an
Hmm.
elevator with a bunch of women and I'm like, la, 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 la,
Yeah.
la, cut it out, cut it out. You know what I mean? I'm feeling what you're
Yes.
feeling. So, how
Yes.
much time was between your loss and your conception with Gabe?
4 months.
4 months.
Four
Okay.
months. Yeah.
So, for
So
those
not very long.
listening, you're hyper fertile after a miscarriage. And so, like, I often have people that call me and say, hey, Heidi, I want to interview you to be my doula. And then maybe they hire me, or maybe like I'm waiting for them to make a decision. And then they'll call and say that they actually experienced a miscarriage. And then, like, literally 40 days later, they'll call back and be like, I'm pregnant again. Like, it's like, whoa, what a roller coaster.
Well, yes.
So in those 4 months though, like, were you and your husband, like, were you like, let's try again right away? I mean, did you even talk about it? Like, what, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's living in between grief and the possibility of hope and joy, like that it could happen again. I mean, that's a really hard space to balance. Like, I'm grieving,
Hmm.
but I'm also ovulating,
Yes. Right.
And I
And
mean,
eager. Yeah.
yeah. So what did that look
Yeah.
like for you guys?
We waited I think we made it 2 months and then we tried 1 month, didn't get pregnant. And then we tried the next month and did get pregnant.
Okay.
And I just remember coming out of the bathroom, taking the test and having it flipped over and being so nervous to look at it and showing it to him and his smile, was like, oh, you're pregnant again. And I saw his smile and that made me happy, but
Mhm.
I didn't feel that same joy immediately. Like I felt paranoid, I guess would be the best word to describe how I felt, like paranoid that I was just going to lose it again and then detached because it took me literally until Gabe was born to attach myself to him. And with Brucey, as stressful as that pregnancy was, I felt attached to him the entire pregnancy. It was like everything else is kind of negative and stressful, but my bond with him is very much there. With Gabe, I didn't feel that way at all. And I think that's just the process of not trusting.
Yeah. Were you able to feel that bond pretty quickly after he was born?
Oh, yeah, immediately. And it's because that birth, so I was a week overdue and I was scheduled to be induced on a Monday morning. Gosh, so he was born 20. So I was scheduled to be induced Monday, January 21st of 2019.
Okay.
And Saturday night, and I was really pissed off about having to be induced. I didn't want to be induced. I wanted nothing to do with it.
Was it medically recommended, like for a reason, like preeclampsia, or was it just like your 41
No,
weeks?
it was just your 41 weeks. He's evicted. And so I was just kind of like, okay, they're not going to deliver the baby unless I do this. So I guess that's what I have to do. And then that Saturday night, my husband was like, we're just going to get these sandwiches that like I really loved these sandwiches while I was pregnant. He's like, we're going to get these. We'll watch a comedy special. We'll just hang out. And I was eating the sandwich, but like not really. And I was just kind of sitting there, wasn't laughing at the comedy. He's like, are you okay? I'm like, I think I'm having contractions, but I'm not sure. So he texts his mom. He's like, I think Jen's having contractions. She's like, time them. So they go from 20 minutes to 10 minutes. And it's like 9:30 at this point, and then it goes from 10 minutes to 6 minutes. Not even skipping a beat.
Yeah,
and
girl, second babies.
Yeah. So I'm like, it's 11 o'clock at this point, and our doorbell rings. And my husband's like, who the heck's at the door? So he like goes down like it's somebody trying to break into the house. And it's his dad. And his dad's like, because at this point my contractions are 4 minutes away. And his dad's very, very mellow. He's literally the most calm man I know. And he's like, Jen's going to need to go to the hospital right now. I'm going to take Brucey for you. Brucey was sleeping. I still remember his little face getting him out of, like, they got him out of bed. I was laboring at that point. And then I get a text from my mother-in-law that's like, don't try to labor at home. Go to the hospital now.
Yep.
So they leave.
Because she knows those second babies, they just are in a hurry, man.
Yes. It's so I get to the hospital at 12:30. And they get me a wheelchair. And I'm like, I think I'm in labor, but I'm not sure because it did not feel like the first time. I was just kind of calm, whatever. I had tested positive for strep. So they roll me in. The nurse kind of has an attitude with me. She's like, oh, okay, put this on and then I'm going to check you. Because she's like, you're scheduled to be induced in a day. And I think they thought that I just wanted the baby out and didn't want to like go through that process. So she like does my exam and she's like, oh shit. And she's like, she's waving people in and she's like, she's 8 centimeters. Get the antibiotics now.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let me pause right there because some of the listeners are like, what is she talking about, right? So around any time in your pregnancy, you can become colonized with strep bacteria, which is called group beta strep or GBS. We all have strep, like, we get strep throat. We have this bacteria on our bodies at all times, okay? And especially inside of our vagina and around our rectum. Sometimes that bacteria colonizes an overgrowth, right? Well, a while ago, they did a clinical trial and they were looking at sudden infant death syndrome. And one of the things that they saw was that there was an increase in sudden infant death syndrome in children that were positive, like they had had a positive exposure to the colonization of GBS bacteria from the birthing person or from their mom. And so there is also increased risk of sepsis, meaning like the baby getting GBS and then getting sepsis from that. So what they decided to do is they decided to test everyone at about 12 weeks. They test your urine. You may not even know that when you go in and pee in a cup. They're actually like testing for GBS. And then around 36 weeks gestation, they'll do a swab, just kind of like with a long Q-tip, and they'll swab your vagina and your rectum, and then they send that off. And if you're positive for GBS, the recommendation is 2 doses of antibiotics. So you guys that are listening and we're like, what the heck was Jenny talking about? This is what she's talking about. Around her 36-week appointment, she tested positive for GBS. And the recommendation is 2 doses of antibiotics before delivery. Well, they're saying, oh shit, because she's 8 centimeters dilated. Like there's no time for 2 doses of
Nope.
antibiotics. Like,
Nope.
and because they have to be dosed, like depending on the antibiotic, they're dosed either 4, 6, or 8 hours apart. So anyway, keep
Yeah.
going. So
There
you're
was
essentially like in triage right now. This nurse is like, oh shit, she
yes.
is in labor.
Yes. Well, and the other thing about they won't give you the epidural until the antibiotics are in your system. And I'm like,
Oh, that's
at
not how
this
it is in my
point,
city.
at this point, I'm like, um, begging, screaming for the epidural, and not necessarily because of the pain, although the pain was bad. It was only because I wasn't sure how pushing was going to feel without an epidural, and I was scared of that.
Okay.
And so I was just like, in my head, I just remember the fluorescent lights, and just holding on to the side of my hospital bed. It felt like my lower body was revving up like an engine. And yeah, so at this point, it's like 1 o'clock. And this nurse, so she was kind of excuse my language, she was kind of a bitch when I first got there. But when she saw that I was 8 centimeters, she was so apologetic. She was countering my contractions. She taught Bruce how to counter my contractions so that it would help me, because
Awesome.
she knew, she's like, this girl is not getting an epidural.
Yeah.
She's not. She's having this baby right now, and
Yeah.
he's just going to come.
Yeah.
So she was an angel after that. And she did apologize to me too, because she knew she was a bitch to me.
Yeah.
And
They're
yeah, so
not used to seeing
no.
women in control of their
Right.
labors. They're used to seeing women out of control. So you roll in and you're like,
I
chill.
think I'm in
And
labor.
you're like, I think I'm in labor. And then you're like, hold on a second. Okay. Well, I mean, maybe I'm in labor,
Yeah.
And so, it's just so hard because we're so used to taming women with an epidural. And when you see people controlling themselves without it, like they're just not used to it. So I'm so glad she taught you guys counter pressure and was able to give you some pain relief that way.
She really did. And I remember I turned back to her and I looked at her and I was like, I am going to shit. And she goes, that's just the baby. And I go, oh no, no, I'm definitely going to poop right now. And then I looked up at my husband and I was like, don't look, don't watch this. And so like that happened. And then they had a whole poo squad come in, like cleaned me like an infant.
Yeah.
And then like that was fine. And within like 5 minutes after that, the doctor was screaming at me to stop pushing, and my body was expelling this child.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was through that experience where I discovered, oh my gosh, I can do that. I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really it was one of the most empowering moments of my life, because I knew that I had weightlifted my entire pregnancy. I had gotten in really good shape after Bruce was born. I didn't have that experience when I was pregnant with Brucey. So I didn't see all my hard work go into like having this outcome. And that to me, I was like, I did it, and I did it without the epidural, which wasn't my plan. It wasn't my plan, because the epidural felt so good with Brucey. And I was scared of the pushing, and then him coming the way he did, like rapid fire. It was just an incredible experience. So
It's so incredible. As a doula, Jenny, sometimes, I mean, y'all, I'm afraid to admit this, but I'm going to. Sometimes my favorite births are ones like this, where they were planning an epidural and they had fear stuck inside of them. You know what I mean? And like they were like, no, but the epidural feels so good. And then they had an unmedicated birth and they were like, yes, I'm a fucking badass. I'm top of the
Yes.
world. Like
Oh yeah.
you're on a high that like, I will say I did it both ways, medicated and unmedicated.
Hmm.
And you are in this high that you can't, it's like a freebie, like you just
Yeah.
can't get to that. You can't achieve that
Hmm.
level of ecstaticness without it, with being numb.
It was almost like an orgasm, but not in a
Yeah.
sexual way. It
Yeah.
really was an orgasmic birth. And
Mhm.
I feel like with that birth, you talk about that high. I feel like I never came down completely from that high. It was this level of confidence that came to me, and it was more of just like I can do hard things. I can do really hard things. And I had already, taught myself that after Bruce was born in my own way, but that experience alone was just empowering. And I needed it because Gabe has been the most energetic and patience testing out of all the kids. So it was just in preparation for that.
Yep. I mean, literally, like I talked about earlier, like this birth just transforms us over and over and over again. And
Hmm.
then parenting really transforms us.
Hmm.
And each child, I believe, is just dropped into our life to just trigger us in the best ways, right? Like
Hmm.
children heal us from our childhood wounds we didn't even know that we had because they just expose them.
Hmm.
And I just think that the world just keeps becoming a better place because we just keep growing through those experiences. So
Yes.
this is about the time our worlds intersected, Jenny, right? Like you had
Hmm.
had Gabe, and I saw this girl on Instagram who had abundant confidence and was showing up, and she's like momming it hard, and she's in her structure, and she's in her routine, and she's working out, and she's in nature, and she's grounding. And I was like, I'm one of lots of people that were really magnetized and drawn to your account and your presence and what you were putting out into the world. And so this is where our worlds intersect. I was wanting to reach out to you to interview you on the podcast. And then you became pregnant again. And I was like, great, pause. We're going to do this after you deliver. And then I'll never forget scrolling through and seeing your post about having twins. And I was like, this is like incredible. So, will you just take us on a journey of the twins' birth story and pregnancy? Like, what was that like to find out you were pregnant with twins?
It was not well received by me when it happened at all. So we were not planning on having any more children. I had actually donated pretty much all of our big stuff, high chairs, bouncers, everything 2 months before I got pregnant with the twins. And I found out I was pregnant. I was actually working a job I did not like. I was closing loans at that time just because I was just trying to contribute to family stuff and, see if that world was for me. It definitely wasn't. It just wasn't a great time mentally. I still had my structure, my working out, but I kind of felt a little detached from what I was doing. And yeah, so I go down to Florida. I was just not in a good mental space. I go down to Florida to see my mom and kind of reconnect, recenter, reground with myself. And my mom was like, I think you're pregnant with twins. What? No, I'm not. Don't put that on me. My grandmother, that maternal grandmother I mentioned earlier, she had passed away in September of 2020. And this is end of July, beginning August of 2021. And I was like, don't put that on me, mom, whatever. So I go back. The next week is my ultrasound, and the tech is silent. And this isn't my first rodeo. So I'm like looking at the thing and I'm like, that's two fucking sacks. That's two sacks. And I'm silent. And she just goes, is this your first? And I go, no, this will be three. And I, told her I had another loss. And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to need to do an internal ultrasound. So you get, dressed accordingly. And I'm going to go talk to the doctor. When I get back, we're going to look at your babies. And I was like, it's more than one. So she initially thought it was triplets.
Okay.
And she comes back. She's like, we're going to confirm it's just two. And at this point, I am hysterical, crying. Like, how the hell I'm in this job I don't like? How the hell am I going to do this? blah, blah, blah,
And you're
blah.
like, and damn, my mom was right.
And I'm like literally flicking my mom the bird in the place. I'm like, I'm going in between hysterically laughing and hysterically crying. I think the girl thinks that I'm absolutely mad. Like, and it's this immediate guilt because I've been in the chair when there's been no heartbeat. And so
Yeah.
I feel like guilt for anybody who's grieving in that way, to be ungrateful for these two lives that I've, now fast forward, they're healthy, beautiful, like they've brought so much joy to our family, but like I was not in that space. So, and then of course it immediately starts, you're a high risk patient. And I'm like, you are not going to call me a high risk patient this whole time, because I'm a psych person, and any words that you say to me are like solidifying in what's happening. And that's pretty much what I felt my entire pregnancy was. They were just trying to put me in this statistic box of what happens to twin moms. And I was like, no, you're not going to do that to me. I'll go to the high risk doctor because like I want to make sure that everything's okay. But it just the level of care to where it's kind of too much, is pretty much what I experienced that whole pregnancy. And then coming to terms with bringing two lives into the world at once was very heavy for me. And I was so sick, like puking pretty much the first half of the whole pregnancy. I was very, very sick, and all they would do was prescribe meds. And I just didn't want to take meds.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to do, but
Well,
so.
I'm going to pause right there and tell the audience there's not a lot you can do besides surrender, right? But a couple of things. High protein, small snacks. So like literally like little protein balls, little vital proteins mixed into your coffee. High protein when we can't eat a lot of food is one of those things that can help, right? Like, of course, there's tons of medications and stuff, but like sucking on those ginger pops, putting peppermints in your mouth, having the alcohol swabs, like taking small sips of bubbly drinks like ginger ale and things like that. But the number one thing I found is that like as much protein as you can get in. Like, and if you have to drink it, just drink it. Like add the protein into the
Yeah.
smoothies, like load it up. Even if you get a couple sips in, it can and help. But at the end of the day, when you're pregnant and you're pregnant with twins, like you're just going to be nauseous.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah. I remember telling this one story on Instagram where I had just gotten home from dropping the boys off at school and daycare, and I get home and I was just like, I just puked in my front lawn like the exorcist, as a bunch of neighborhood kids were standing outside waiting for the school bus, and they were all horrified. And I just remember, this little girl's face, just what is happening to her? Is she okay? It was
were you like
horrible. But
stomach flu? It's okay,
yeah, I was like, I'm okay. I'm good. And then the boys are just, Brucey specifically was just mortified.
Oh my gosh, of course.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
yeah.
gosh.
So
So did it ever like cross your mind where you like forget all this medical stuff, I'm just gonna have a home birth?
yes, I remember telling several friends, like, me, I would squat over a stream and have these babies. And I honestly believe that I could have done that. Truly. I believe I could have done it. But my husband and his father, having the medical background that he does, everybody was collectively more comfortable with me going to the hospital. I
Okay.
think in hindsight, had they known that the birth went the way it was going to, they would have said, okay, we can do a home birth or go to a birthing center or something like that. But I think everybody was a little bit nervous
Okay. Well,
going into the birth.
all right. Well, I'm dying. I'm like, okay, how did it go? Like, how many
So
weeks gestation were you?
I made it all the way to almost 39 weeks, actually, because the way
What?
they were like, we have to schedule you for induction. So the way that the office, and I researched thoroughly up in this area, pretty much all the offices are the same. Nobody will do breech deliveries, it's like both babies have to be head down or else we won't even try.
Okay.
And so I worked out the whole pregnancy. I lifted, I swam, and
Okay.
both babies at 32 weeks, Jackson was breech. And then at the next appointment, he flipped. And so I
Okay.
was double head down. But they scheduled me for induction on St. Patty's Day. So I show up to the hospital, walk in. I'm so nervous because ultimately my biggest fear was a C-section, and like not because, oh, I want to like have all of it. It wasn't anything like that. It's just serious fear about getting sliced open because that is the most invasive surgery you can have. And I'm not only caring for twins, I'm caring for 4 babies or 4 children. I'm a stay-at-home mom at this point. I ended up losing my job in maternity leave. So like I'm a full stay-at-home mom. I knew it was coming because of the way interest rates were going. But
Okay.
so that ended up happening. I knew I'm going to be like the full-time caretaker. I'm going to have my plate is going to be full. I don't want to be recovering from a C-section. And so going in, I'm like, what if there's an emergency situation? I'm like, the sirens are going in my head. And I remember New Year's Eve that year when it was just the boys still, we went on a family hike. And on our way back, it was a steep incline on the way back. And I got my breathing up and I told myself I was only going to nostril breathe. And I remember looking up to the tree line in the sky and the way that it looked. And I told myself, when things feel hard during labor and delivery with the twins, when I'm feeling out of touch, I'm coming back right here. Like, this is the moment. And it was just the way everything smelt, and it was just complete clarity. And I told myself that. So we go in the morning of, and I keep going back to that place. The nurses come in. The nurses are rock stars. I'm like, okay, these women are on my team. Like, if you go into the hospital and you can say the nurses are on your team, like you're in this level of confidence, like we're going to make this happen today. So one of the nurses was just completely like pumped to be delivering twins, and then pumped that my husband was like, oh, she was out swinging the kettlebell yesterday in the yard. So this nurse was like, we're gonna have a rock star delivery today.
Yeah.
So
And was the plan medicated or unmedicated?
I wanted to go unmedicated.
Okay.
And I had throughout the whole pregnancy, every time I went in, telling I want to have an unmedicated natural birth. They're like, okay, well, if the baby, like every time I went in, babies aren't head down. You're having a C-section every single time I went in. And it's like, I feel like I'm fighting them. Well, the midwife comes in and she measures me and they're tracking my contractions. They're like, oh, you're already in active labor. I'm like, really?
Yay.
They're like, yes. They're like, yes, you're in active labor. I'm like, oh, so of course I got a little cocky. I was like, this isn't that bad. Look at me go. I'm in here. I'm in active labor. I didn't even know it. I was already 4 centimeters. So both babies are head down still. For twins, you're supposed to deliver in the OR. So in the operating room, at least in Virginia.
So in North Carolina, it's that way too, but you are in the operating room for the birth of twin A. And then if twin B stays head down, you can leave the operating room and go back to your room for delivery.
That's so interesting. That's interesting to me. Like the whole way it works. And I understand why you'd want to be in the operating room, but since it wasn't my first birth and I kind of had the unique experience I did with Gabe and Bruce, it was kind of like, I don't want you to interrupt my flow of, if one of the babies is coming or whatever, like I'm going to labor in here. I want to have the babies in here. But I feel like I kind of stepped back because my ultimate goal was to not have a C-section. And I felt like they wanted me to have a C-section, especially this midwife.
They did. You didn't feel that way. They did.
The midwife, like she had twins herself, and she was kind of nasty to me. And like she was kind of rolling her eyes at me wanting to have an unmedicated birth. But so I labored in that room. She checked me, you're 4 centimeters, whatever. I got up, I did the ball, I walked around. My husband and I were literally joking the entire time. And then she comes back in. She told me, if you start progressing, then I won't push for an epidural. And when she came back in at 3:00 in the afternoon and checked me, she's like, oh, you've barely moved. You're still at a 5 centimeters. And then my logical mind is like, but am I? Like, how do you really know? Because I feel like I've been laboring in here all day and there's no way I'm still at a 5. I feel like she wanted me to have that epidural and I felt backed into a corner. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, I just want these twins here safely. I like just want this to go this way. So I got the epidural and it was really nice. It did help me out a little bit.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to
but
interject right there. There's a reason they also want you to have an epidural. Okay. And the reason is we were just talking about, you guys, we were talking about the OR, right? If you're unmedicated and you deliver twin A unmedicated and then twin B flips, and it's not your fault, Jenny, or any other twin parent, right? It's that if twin B flips, our medical society is not trained on vaginal breech births. Okay. So then you would have to be put under general anesthesia for the cesarean section. So you wouldn't be awake for it. So they do push pretty hard in my area for epidural twin births so that you can stay awake if a cesarean section was needed, because a general anesthesia delivery has more complications and can be more traumatic. So I know exactly why that nurse was pushing for your epidural, because she didn't believe both babies were going to stay head down.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
definitely. She definitely didn't. She did explain that to me as well. Like, she's like, we're going to have to knock you out completely if we need to do a C-section. And then of course my stubborn behind was like, but you're not going to need to do the C-section. Because I knew, I'm like, these babies are coming and they're both going to come out. So anyway,
but the epidural was nice.
The epidural was nice. It was nice. And the difference between this one and Brucey's is that I could still kind of feel a little bit. So I still felt like I had some, not control, but I could monitor myself and feel my body still.
Okay.
Which is really what I enjoyed about Gabe's birth, was that I could feel everything and I felt like I just could monitor myself better and make, moves with my body that felt better. Anyway, that was at like 3:30. And then all of a sudden at 7, I'm ready to push. And so they come in and they had a whole other team. There were so many people in the room. And then there was a med student that they asked if she could watch the birth. And I was like, sure, why not?
It's already a party.
Right. The doctor. So there's the midwife who's going to deliver. Then there's the doc who's staying external to make sure that baby B doesn't flip. Lainey was locked in, ready to come out. I pushed 4 times with Lainey. She came out at 7:10. And then the doc, he didn't even have to really do anything. And within 5 minutes later, I pushed Jackson out at 7:15. Wow. And I just remember in between the two, I am screaming for Delaney, just screaming for her, like, give me my baby. And they're like, you got to get the second baby out. So I pushed Jackson out. They immediately put Jackson on me. And the doc was male. And I'd never met him before. He was just there that day. And I just remember his face was like, and he came over and he was like, I've never seen a twin birth like that before. She had so much control. He was like, she had so much control.
What a compliment.
Yeah, I know. I felt the same way. So yeah, so they both came out and it was a beautiful experience. The twin experience was something that I honestly don't even have words for. It was just something else.
It's so beautiful. And one thing I wanted to share with the audience that I rarely get to share is when Delaney, it's Delaney, right?
Yes.
Okay. I thought you said that. And so when Delaney was born, they would have cut her umbilical cord, and that umbilical cord would have been hanging out of Jenny's vagina, because even if there's 2 separate placentas, they tend to fuse.
Yeah, we fused. We fused together.
Okay.
Yep.
And so a lot of times people ask me well, what happens with twins? So you'll deliver twin A, you'll deliver twin B, and then you'll still deliver one giant placenta. Yeah. It's not like twin A placenta, twin B placenta. It's always twin A, twin B, and then the placenta.
So, yeah. That's what I actually asked the nurse. I said, is it going to be baby B or baby A placenta? That was one of the questions I had initially too. So that was, it was a cool experience. I don't even remember birthing the placenta though. there was just so much going on. I don't remember that part.
Yeah. And eventually you got both of them together, united.
I did, yeah.
Your
And then
chest.
tandem nursing started.
That's a whole nother podcast episode,
Yeah,
Jenny.
it was.
Maybe
Yeah.
we should, maybe we really should record it at some point too. So, well, I've just so happy that you were on the podcast today and that we got to share your wonderful birth stories. I conclude every episode by asking everyone what their favorite, like, baby product or parenting product is, so that if you are going to a baby shower or you're chatting with your best friend, what's something you want to make sure like that they buy or that's on their registry that could support them?
So with the twins, definitely the Z pillow. If you have twins, you need a big, large nursing pillow that's going to hold both of them. I liked the Z pillow.
Okay.
I love the Snuggle Me organic bedside little thing for the beginning. And then
Bassinet.
yeah, a little bassinet. And then honestly, cook your friends a meal. That was something that saved me mentally. My dad and stepmom cooked so many meals. My dad actually bought us a deep freezer and filled it halfway with like meals.
Oh,
And
that's
so we
so
could just pop them in
loving.
the oven. Yeah. And so, and then somebody who is a friend, but she was never a really close friend. She cooked us a bunch of food, like just out of the kindness of her heart. And those things, like giving somebody food when they've had a baby is the best gift you could give them. So give them food.
Yes. Oh, that's really good advice. And what your dad did for you is so,
Yeah.
so loving. So
Yeah,
loving.
we really were so blessed. So many people like came through for us when we had the twins. So
yeah, it's amazing the people that show up for us when we need them.
yeah. Yes,
And then the people that
definitely.
don't, we notice things.
Well, it's
So,
always good to outgrow people as well.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
having kids is how that happens, I believe.
it is.
For sure.
Jenny, you've had an incredible 9 years to see like how much you've evolved as a person and as a parent. So before we jump off, can you just share a little bit with the audience on how to get a hold of you and if they want to buy this children's book or how they could connect with some of the important work that you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So Instagram, I'm Jenny_Stinney. You can find me there. I have Monsters Can't Do Yoga on Amazon, and I Saw a Spider on Amazon as well, which is my second book. Got a few more in the works there, and then a blog called Roots and Ripples, ROOTSNRIPPLES.com.
Excellent. You guys, so subscribe to Jenny's blog, jump on Amazon and buy a copy of this children's book and read it with your kids. Thank you so much for being on today.
All right. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.